Welcome back to Automotive Electronics. Today we're working on an 06 Tacoma. The complaint on this one is the gas gauge is reading half full even though the tank is empty. I'm a little speculative on this. The gas gauge down here at 0, so I'm thinking that this is probably a problem that's in the car versus in the cluster. But we're told him we'd take it apart and look at it, so that's what we're going to do. To get this thing apart, there are 3 screws on the back here, and this panel has got a couple clips around on it, and then it comes off. You're not going to be able to see, there's nothing on the back of the board on this one. So we got to get the front of the board exposed, and to do that we need to start working on these clips that hold the lens on. Lens is off. What I'm doing here is I'm just kind of trying to feel the action on the motor. You want to feel a smooth action, nothing ratchety, nothing hanging up. Don't believe that we don't have a power up for this, so I'm not going to be able to see beyond just things I can see with my eyes here. Alright, so we're going to get these needles off. What you want to do is mark where the needle is pointing just subtly with a pencil. I come out here on the edge. Nobody's ever going to see that part. This one I'm just going to kind of make note that it's, see how it says non-visible area. Alright, so we're going to work counterclockwise, pulling up with the needles. And this one we're going to work, actually those were clockwise and this one is counterclockwise. So these needles, they have, these motors actually have stops on them. So right now the stop is right there. If you rotate it around, you can reset that stop to wherever you want. Okay, what I'm doing is rotating against that stop. Now this is not universal across all clusters. Some clusters don't like you to do that, and these little gears inside these motors will strip out. This is not one of them. So this is all we have to do on this one, is rotate against the stops. After you do a few thousand clusters, you know which ones are which. And we're going to get the board out by gently prying up on it from the rear here. Got some clips holding onto it as well. So, alright, you'll notice the pins coming through here for the display. These match up with this section right here. Those just pull out, push back in. Let's get over here and look at the board a little closer on the other bench, see what we can see. So what I'm looking for when I'm looking at a board just for problems is I'll first inspect these things. This is where the header, where the connector to the car comes through and connects to the board with these pins here. And I'm looking for any breaks in the solder, any cracking, any loose pins. There's another connector over here. And that's actually better done under the microscope, so let me get that set up. Okay, so we're under the microscope now, and like I said, looking at each and every one of those pins, see if there's any cracking or anything that looks janky. That's a scientific word for those of you who didn't know. So this pin here is a little suspect. You can see some cracking going on. Need a little finer tip than this. Let's try the tweezers. So you can see a little bit of cracking around the edge here. I don't think this one's causing a problem. Probably not the issue. That one looks like it's a little worse. Now, you'll note that when we were looking at that through just the regular camera, we weren't able to see that. So microscope really helps out with this. We're going to reflow these regardless, just in case they're a problem. But I doubt very seriously that's going to be an issue. So the next thing, we had the complaint that the gas gauge wasn't working. So the gas gauge is the lower right gauge over here. I'll get that under here. We're going to be looking, let me get zoomed out a little bit. So here's the gauge pin, the needle that comes through. All right. And these will be your pins that connect that little black motor to the board. And you're looking for the same thing there. Cracks, anything unusual. And I don't see anything there. Failing finding anything with those, I start looking at resistors and looking for the same basic stuff. Cracks, burns. Anything looks like it might be missing, etc. So we just kind of go over the board and assess for anything we can find. And I'm not finding anything with this. Let's go over here and have a little chat. The thing is, with these, I get a lot of clusters in like this that supposedly have a problem, and the mechanics got it down to diagnosed down to the point where it is, in his mind, definitively the instrument cluster. So when I get something like this and I cannot find exactly what is associated with that, and or a problem that stands out to me, or whatever, yeah, we could spend a lot of time analyzing every little detail of the board. It's not cost effective. It's just not cost effective to do that. So what we'll do, the cost effective thing to do, is get another cluster. I'm not going to convince anybody that they diagnosed the car wrong. So we'll give them another cluster, and we'll get it cloned over to the information out of this cluster, and that will take care of the problem for him. If he gets that cluster in the car and it still doesn't work, well, pretty solid evidence there that he needs to look somewhere else. So I try to keep notes on these clusters. We do an exchange, and I try to follow up with them and find out that, that fixed the car, that did not fix the car, etc. So I know that when I have this cluster in my stock, is it a working cluster, or did it actually have something wrong with the gas gauge? So I can note that. Quite often, it is what it is, and there's nothing wrong with that cluster in the first place. It's a funny situation. When you feel like there's nothing wrong with it, but somebody else is insisting there is. And anyhow, I'll follow up and etc. And we'll get this guy a new gauge set, because I don't see anything here that would have been causing the problem that he is he's claiming it has. Let's get back over here and talk about how we would replace this. So this cluster is replaceable by reading this chip right here. It's 93C56. You need an EEPROM reader programmer, in order to read the information off this chip and then write it back to the other cluster. That information on that chip will contain, in this case, probably just mileage, maybe a VIN. In other cases, it'll contain things like security information, your key information, etc. It's all the specific information for the vehicle. The processor above it here will contain the software. This will contain the writable information that's specific to the vehicle. This one will contain information that's common to all of that model car. So for that year model, that configuration, etc., the software will live up on a processor, and that's never rewritten. Well, I wouldn't say never. I mean, that factory can rewrite updated software to it, but the things particular to the car live here. Two ways to do that. You can desolder this chip. If you don't have an EEPROM programmer, you can desolder this chip using a little hot air station like this. throw a little hot air on it, get yourself some tweezers, pull that chip off. Of course, this one has some coating all over it. You need to remove that coating first. Usually a little acetone or rubbing alcohol, get that coating off, get it nice and clean, and you get that chip off. You get it off your donor cluster, and you solder it on the cluster that's going back into the car. It has all the information, the mileage, and everything that you're going to need is going to be on that chip, specific to that vehicle. That process just clones this cluster. The other thing you can do is take your EEPROM reader, read this chip, save the file, read the other one, save the file, and then program in the information out of this chip into the other cluster, and these things will be an exact duplicate. That's how we do it here. That's quicker and easier. All I've got to do is clean off these pins so my programmer will attach. It's not that big of a process once you've done a few hundred of them, and you're good to go. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to get one of these clusters on order. You know, I said I was going to order one, and I am, but I'm going to do this a different way. We're going to go back in here. We're going to resolder all of these pins, and then I'm going to go ahead and read this chip and save the file, and we'll give the cluster back to him with the pins soldered just on the off chance that fixed something. I don't think it's going to, but we'll give it a shot, and if not, I'll have the file here for him so we can replace it, replace the entire cluster if needed. And since you know, we'll know that today before we actually order the cluster whether this one worked or not, hopefully. Alright, so when you're just soldering header pins, this ain't real complicated. Whoa. You just need to get you some solder. Nothing too big, nothing that you're going to use for sweating pipes or anything. It's actually for electronics. And you're just going to get yourself in a position of comfort, heat up each joint with your soldering iron, add a little solder to them. I mean, technically, you probably don't even have to add solder. You're just reflowing the solder that's there, so any cracking that occurred through years of vibration, etc., will be healed. That's what I'm going to do next time somebody asks me what I do for a living. I'm a healer. Texas, that's probably not a religious figure. In Texas, a healer is probably more like a cowboy that specializes in roping. Which those guys can make some pretty good money, so. Oh, I'm off camera here. My assistant didn't alert me. Getting old absolutely sucks. I would advise against it. The alternative is not good either. If you ever bridge pins like that, here's the process to get them clear. Just take you some wick and suck the excess solder off. Clear the bridge between the pins. Carry on. Life isn't over. We're going to get this chip here cleaned up a little bit. If I can get my lacquer thinner can open. Oh, things are going to get toxic up in here. So here's how I handle cleaning it off. If I got to use a little lacquer thinner, you just put a little in a paint cap, and then we seal that bad boy because that's some stinky stuff. Alright, take your little brush, dip it in there. This is just straight lacquer thinner, and it just melts that coating away pretty easily. There's some different types of coating that get on these things that, and you can see I can remove that coating pretty easily. Some different types of coating, some of them take acetone, some of them take lacquer thinner. I'll start with the lacquer thinner, it's a little less aggressive, and then we go from there. We'll let this dry for a minute. So this is the process of reading these chips. This is a device from AR Labs that reads EEPROMs. And what we're going to be doing is reading this EEPROM. I got to remember which size, what chipset this was. 93C56. These little clips. I'll show you where pin 1 is. I don't know if y'all can see the red dot. I do kind of apologize for the camera angle here. I know it sucks, but it's best I could do to show you how I go about this. So we get the clip on there. I'm going to tell the software 93C56 is what we're working on. Get it hooked up with the right settings here in the 93 section of this board, and we're going to be reading it at low voltage. Escape, and I'm going to go to the buffer. I'm going to hit G. There's our information. Information populated there. It's verified. This is some old software from the company's AR Labs. You can look them up. They're arlabs.com. You can get this box here from them. You can get the software with it. This software is great. It works on older machines, and you can get some devices that are newer, but I've used this forever. It's solid. You can change your voltage settings for reading at lower voltages, which is good, because if you inject too much voltage in these EEPROMs, what happens is it starts turning components next to the EEPROM on, which will interfere with your readings. This one allows you to read it at a lower voltage. Let's see what voltage I'm reading this one at. This one read at 3 volts. So if we go all the way up to 5 volts, it'll definitely read it at 5 volts. But the problem is you may have some interference from surrounding processors and etc. This is a good clean read. This software will verify all that for you with one keystroke of G once you're inside the buffer. Alright, we're going to escape our buffer. We're going to save buffer to disk file, and that's option A. And we're going to name our file. Define buffer range, file saved. Now what I can do now is I can send this back and we can see if it works, and the customer can call me and let me know, okay, it worked, it didn't work, right? If the answer is it didn't work, I have his file here. He doesn't have to come back. I can just order this particular cluster, and once it gets in, upload the file into it, we're done. He comes and picks up his cluster. It is 2 trips, but that's better than 3 trips. So that's the way we're going to handle this. You know, I'm going to show you another process which will tell us something. So we are going to go ahead and swap some motors around. You said I didn't feel any problem with these motors when I was so we're going to suck all the solder off the pins so we'll be able to remove the motor. Alright, so we'll get the motor out, and we'll take the one above it out, so there's no complaint about that one. We'll move it down to the gas gauge. I believe this is the temperature gauge. So it is a possibility that the stepper motor is just bad. I doubt that, seeing as the gauge was moving and etc., but there's a possibility. So we'll just take this one, move it down, If you guys are wondering what all that noise is in the background, that's my bird. She's having a day. And we'll take the old motor that was in the gas gauge and we're going to put it up in the area, in the temperature gauge. If a guy calls me back and tells me, hey, you fixed the gas gauge but the temperature gauge don't work, then we also know what the problem is. We know we had a bad stepper motor. Right thing to do, if this was shipped into me, the right thing to do would just be replace the stepper motor. But this is a guy that's pretty local here, so he can take this back and try it. And it's kind of a diagnostic tool for me, so I know. I've never seen these Toyota motors go bad. I'm sure that there's occasions where they do. But I would expect that they'd fail in the same way that GM motors fail, where they get ratchety and they don't have a fluid motion to them. So we'll give that a shot and we'll get this back together. So this is the trick on these, is to get these pins from the LCD lined up with that header underneath. The easiest method of doing that is go ahead and pull your LCD out. Get your board set. Now you've got a guide down here that'll just guide these pins right into place. And we just press them in place. Get your faceplate back on there. There's little tabs that this thing will slide into. And we'll get our needles. Rotate them around. These will rotate clockwise until you get to the mark you made. Then you'll be able to feel the stop there. Same with this one. These are going to go clockwise to the stop. If you go a little past it like I just did, just go back around all the way until you get to the stop. Okay. Alright, all good. All in, all done. So I got home today and I decided we were going to follow up with the customer during my editing process here. And it turns out that didn't make any difference in the cluster. So we know a couple things from that. We know that the instrument cluster, that the stepper motors did not make any difference. The problem did not swap from the gas gauge to the temperature gauge. That tells us stepper motors aren't a problem. Also, the header pins were not a problem because it's doing exactly the same thing. So reflowing those header pins didn't make any difference. Really debated on whether or not to post this video after hearing that, but this is a good example of how we go about this. So I'm going to go ahead and post it. It's not going to say confirm fix because we don't have a confirm fix. When we get the new instrument cluster in that I've ordered, we'll put that in there. And if he still has the same problem, which I suspect he will, but he could be right. If that process helped you in any way, if it helps you determine what's wrong with your cluster, with your vehicle, it's not always the correct thing to do to just blame the instrument cluster as the problem because that's where you see the problem. The instrument cluster a lot of times is just doing what it's told to do. So something else is giving it the bad information, it's going to show you bad information. Hope that helps y'all out in some way. If it does, get down there and like and subscribe. I'm going to probably be posting in the comments section whether a replacement cluster actually fixed this car or not. I like to do the follow-ups and find out, so we'll find out for sure if this was an instrument cluster issue or whether it was a misdiagnosis. I appreciate you guys. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see y'all on the next one.